In 1913, something remarkable happened. 55,000 Civil War veterans returned to Gettysburg. They came from every corner of the country. Some arrived by train, others came by the brand new automobile. And these men were old. Many of them were feeble and needed canes and crutches to walk with, while others were still hardy and healthy. 50 years earlier, these men had stood on that very ground and tried to kill each other. But this time, they weren't coming to fight. They were coming back to remember. So that raises a question. Why would former enemies return to the battlefield 50 years later? The reunion didn't just happen by accident. It began with the vision of one man, Henry Huidekoper. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Huidekoper served as the second in command of the 150th Infantry. I was able to find a photo of the 150th. It's a little grainy and kind of blurry, and so I wanted to see if AI could clean it up. Now, I fully understand the limitations that AI can cause. I promise not to use it often, but when I do, I'll let you know. On July 1st, 1863, on the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, the 150th Pennsylvania Infantry found itself facing the Confederate Army. During the fighting, a rebel bullet struck Henry Huidekoper's leg and cut it to the bone. The bullet was called a mini ball, and it was the standard Civil War .58 caliber bullet. Kind of like this one. Now, to give you an idea of how big a .58 caliber bullet is, here it is besides a .22, a 9mm, a .38 caliber, and a .44 caliber, which is the Dirty Harry gun.
Go ahead. Make my day.
And here it is, the .58 caliber. The mini ball is conical in shape, and it's made of soft lead, which creates devastating wounds. Rather than simply passing through the body, the soft lead would flatten on impact, shattering bones and leading to countless battlefield amputations. A mini ball didn't so much pierce the body as it bludgeoned it. It was a terrible wound, and when Henry Huidekoper was shot in the leg, he kept fighting. A medic bandaged his leg in the field, but almost immediately, another mini ball smashed into his arm. Despite the pain, Huidekoper continued commanding the 150th during one of the most desperate moments of the battle. All of the other officers in the 150th had been killed or wounded. Because of this, Henry refused to leave the field. He remained in command until he finally grew faint from loss of blood. For his actions that day, Henry Huidekoper received the Medal of Honor. At the time, the Medal of Honor was a brand new award. It had been established in March of 1863, only a few months before the Battle of Gettysburg, and it remains the highest military decoration awarded by the United States for acts of extraordinary valor. His citation read, "While engaged in repelling an attack of the enemy, received a severe wound of the right arm, but instead of retiring, remained at the front in command of the regiment." After the war, Huidekoper returned to active service in September 1863, but the severity of his wounds eventually forced him to resign. He was then appointed a major general in the Pennsylvania National Guard. Afterwards, he served as Philadelphia's postmaster general, and then later eventually began a career with the Bell Telephone Company. But whenever he wasn't working, he found himself drawn back to Gettysburg. He would wander the now quiet fields that had once witnessed unimaginable violence. Even decades later, the landscape still bore the scars of battle, especially the trees that had been riddled with musket fire. He often visited the ground near McPherson's farm, where the 150th Pennsylvania had fought. He was also known to visit the very spot where he had been wounded. Huidekoper was deeply involved in veterans' affairs and attended as many reunions as he could. But over the years, he noticed something. Time was wearing down the old soldiers. Every year, the reunion became a little smaller, while the list of those who had passed away grew longer. It seemed that time was running out for the veterans. Huidekoper envisioned a reunion that would bring together both veterans from the North and the South, while they were still healthy enough to make the journey. In some ways, the reunion would become a kind of tontine, or what's sometimes called a dead man's banquet. It's the idea that the last survivors gathered together one final time, to remember the friends who are no longer there. One of my favorite examples of this comes from the old TV show MASH. In season 8, episode 18, it's called Old Soldiers. In the episode, Colonel Potter receives a bottle of brandy from a recently deceased friend. He explains that during World War I, he and several buddies discovered a cache of brandy while hiding in a chalet in France. After drinking the night away, they decided to save the last bottle and leave it with a lawyer. Their agreement was simple. Whoever became the last surviving member of the group would receive the bottle and raise one final toast to his old friends. In the show, Colonel Potter drinks that first toast alone before sharing the bottle with the rest of the cast. Now, getting back to Henry Huidekoper, he envisioned the 50th anniversary in a similar manner, as a final gathering for the men who had survived. Union veterans were invited, and so were the Confederates. In fact, every honorably discharged veteran, including sailors and members of the United States colored troops, were welcome to attend. The concept was simple. Former adversaries reunited as Americans, not as North and South, and not as victors and defeated, but as survivors of a terrible war. The idea of the reunion caught on, and once the politicians got a hold of it, they wrote long-winded speeches about national healing and reconciliation. And these splashed across newspapers across the world. Now, one indispensable source for discussing the Grand Reunion is this book. It's the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg report. Now, it's considered the holy Bible of the 1913 reunion, and it's chock full of facts, figures, and photos. And if you really want to read the speeches, you can find the full transcripts inside this book. But the real reunion wasn't about the speeches. This reunion was for the rank and file privates who pulled the triggers and carried the scars. Some came to recall the battle and revisit the spot where they had fought. Others came to look up their old pals and to swap stories around the campfire. And some came back to honor those who had paid the last full measure of devotion. But somewhere along the lines, they ran into their opposite number. Maybe it was in the chow line or out on the battlefield itself. And that's what makes this reunion so unique. The former enemies would always ask each other, "Hey, where are you from?" And the one might say, "Oh, I'm from New York." And the other might say, "Well, I'm from Georgia." After exchanging some pleasantries, one might say to the other, "Maybe I was the one who took off your leg. And maybe you were the one that put the bullet in my side." And instead of rekindling old hostilities, they would often wander the battlefield to find a spot where they had fought against each other. And this wasn't a single isolated incident. It happened all day, every day during the 1913 reunion. Did they reconcile? I don't fully know, but I do believe they were able to make peace with their past. The 1913 reunion was an extraordinary event. Roughly 55,000 Civil War veterans gathered at Gettysburg. Now just stop and think about that for a moment. Two opposing armies returning to the very battlefield where they had fought 50 years earlier. Now, they weren't there to fight again, but they were there to shake hands and to swap stories and to remember the men who never made it home. Reporters came from around the world to witness it. Hundreds of journalists covered the event, and time again, they all came to the same conclusion. There was simply nothing like it in the annals of history. Never before had two opposing armies returned to the same battlefield. Not to renew the war, at least, but to make peace. And yet, most people today have never even heard of the 1913 reunion. Why? Because history has a habit of remembering bad news and often forgets good news. Now, just 1 year before the reunion in 1912, the world had been captivated by the sinking of the RMS Titanic. It made headlines then, and it's still making headlines today. Only a year later, in 1914, Europe would be plunged into the First World War. It was a conflict so massive and so destructive that it would reshape the 20th century. Against events like those, it's easy to see how something quieter and something more hopeful would fade into the background. I spent almost 7 years researching the 1913 Gettysburg Reunion, and my book, The Old Soldier Show, is finally coming out on August 4th, 2026. Now, just a word of warning. This is not a book for hardcore history fans. This is geared more towards those who would never normally pick up a history book. It's filled with a lot of snark, and it dives into some of the more humorous sides of the reunion. And to be completely honest, I tried to have a little fun with the history. Now, during my research, I discovered far more stories than I could ever fit into a single book. In the end, I had to make some difficult choices. The finished manuscript is just over 100,000 words, but honestly, it could have been twice that. And so entire storylines simply had to be left out. And that's really why this series exists. It's a chance to tell the stories that didn't make it into the book. Over the next few episodes, we're going to explore this reunion together. The well-known moments, the forgotten ones, and some stories, as far as I can tell, haven't really been told at all. This is the Old Soldiers Show. They paid the price of admission 50 years ago.